Good evening, Galion. That screwy internet, we had a little trouble getting connected, but glad to be on. I want to really talk about one item and then get into questions this evening. Tomorrow night, in really a kind of odd set of circumstances, there's only one ordinance on the agenda, and it's an ordinance that in no way do I expect council to pass on the first reading. The ordinance is really an ordinance that is designed to create a port authority for Galion. And so I suspect even with this audience that have a lot of choices about what to be doing on a Monday night, that there is, and therefore you're interested in Galion affairs in one thing or another. My suspicion is that many people, even the most civically oriented, are probably not real aware of what a port authority is, how it operates, and why it's such an important tool now in terms of Galion's development. So really start with the original idea off the original idea since I've been mayor to go with a port authority really comes from a recommendation that came from consultants a few years ago when we first acquired the South Street Commerce Center, or old HTI building. That recommendation at that point was to form a port that could be the owner, landlord, maintainer of those type of industrial development buildings. Well, what happened basically is that events overtook the plan to create a port authority back in, I believe it was 2016. We found a tenant, and in a 3-year period now we've sold that building. That experience is probably the exception to the rule when it comes to that kind of reuse of a building. So really back in 16 we knew that we wouldn't get lucky every time we had a development opportunity, and that at some point we'd need to revive the idea of a port authority, and in my view that time is now. There are at least a handful of initial projects that a port authority could tackle and move, to use a football analogy, but move the ball down the field, if you will, to mix a metaphor. But and so they really include some of the most important development opportunities, the most important situations in terms of what Galion needs to do next on its way to recovery and growth and population and the kinds of shared vision that I think we're building here in town. So let me go through those quickly. The first goal that I think we would be charging a port authority with is to put together a plan to bring a grocery store commercial operation to town. It's been over a year or close to a year since Guyers was closed, and I talked at some length 3 weeks ago about my sense that we had to move ahead, get a new grocery operation along with some extra square footage, and so that's one project that they could lead the way on, because the Port Authority is the ideal owner, developer of buildings in the absence of some private investment, which we certainly would see as the first option, but has not been forthcoming. The second primary use of a Port Authority is in developing a new industrial park. Now, I think that one thing that both friends and foes of what's going on in city government would say that one thing that hasn't happened yet is we really haven't been in a situation to bring new industry to town, and what I think many Galionites envision, a new factory, new employer, and those sorts of things. Well, one of the reasons that hasn't happened is that we don't have a platform. We don't have an industrial facility with proper utilities that you could actually go out into the national market or the statewide market recruiting industry. You have to have a place to bring them, and in my view, you have to have a facility to offer for them to move in. Port Authority, once again, is a real ideal structure for putting together an industrial park. And if we had more time, I'd talk about 2 or 3 other port authorities that aren't on a river or aren't on a lake or don't have a major airport that have used this port authority structure to acquire old industrial facilities, bring them back to life, and in some or many cases really bring new industry to the area. Places like Newark and Zanesville and other places around the state. So that's the second issue, that we need to develop an industrial park, and within that, the need to develop it within an area that's known as an opportunity zone, which is a new federal tax structure, tax benefit that could really help trigger. It's a nationwide program. We're lucky enough to have an enterprise zone that includes part of the Galion area. The third project, the third situation that a port authority could really help the city of Galion with is next year, towards the end of the year, next year about this time, we'll be pretty furiously or pretty aggressively in the discussion about what to do with the hotel uptown. And there's a possibility that based on the various owners of the old Ritchie House, the apartment complex uptown, that could fall back into the city's hands. And if there are questions, I could answer them. We could go into detail on that project some other night. But it's real important that you have a port authority in place in anticipation of that asset coming back into city possession, and to be the best outcome to be able to have that asset moved to the Port Authority for its ability to manage and operate. A couple of other items, and then we'll finish up the discussion with what really may be the forefront of why we need a Port Authority now. But it also is the case that a Port Authority would be helpful in the redevelopment of uptown buildings. We have some vacant buildings. We have a couple of areas, one whole block it seems, but for 1 or 2 buildings that need some attention. So once the Port Authority is up, running, and successful, it certainly could play a real important, critical role in the owning of buildings as they're redeveloped uptown. Perhaps the best example of that, in my mind at least, might be the depot. That is slowly moving back to a rehabilitated state, but at some point in the future, maybe in a year, 2 years, or 3, it's going to need a professional operation to make sure that it's managed appropriately and fully utilized. So that would be what I describe. A fourth area is the uptown redevelopment opportunities, and the fifth area that is a possibility a few years out would be having the operation of the airport, currently under the mayor's office, perhaps folded into a Port Authority operation. So that is, I'd have to describe that as medium and long range, but that would be the fifth opportunity. Number 1 on the list, to get to the subject, is that really the time has come to move ahead, as I've said a couple of Monday nights over the past month or 2, with a plan to construct a athletic complex that would not only set forth leap us forward in terms of the kinds of recreational assets, facilities that we have for area kids, Galion kids, but certainly has great potential to become a travel and tourism driver, and many of us feel would be something that would be a real asset for Galion. Well, here again, that facility is most ideally suited for Port Authority ownership and development. And so, as you can see, there's 3 or 4 other things right in the immediate forefront that need to be tackled by a port. But I want to be honest that probably one of the main reasons we're talking about it with the kind of urgency I am now, or those proponents of the Free Center are talking about now, is because the real potential for the owning, financing, and operation of a facility like is envisioned. So Port Authority tomorrow night, if you were to come to the meeting or read about it, there'll be basically an ordinance that authorized the creation of the Port Authority. we're envisioning 5 members on the port. I've talked to at least 5 people in the community that I believe are highly qualified that have agreed to serve on it. And I have to say, sometimes it's one of the misnomers about the mayor's job is that people are anxious to serve on various committees or boards. Sometimes you have to really coax people to step forward and take that role. When it came to talking to people about sitting on the Port Authority Board, it was unanimous in the people that I talked to's interest and really a sense of enthusiasm about the many ways that kind of structure entity would help the community. So what I anticipate happening, the ordinance introduced without names, and then next week, I believe it's next Tuesday, is an Economic Development Committee meeting in which that committee will discuss the members. The Ohio law requires the members to be appointed by the mayor with the advice and consent of council. So we'll go through that advice and consent process to the extent council wants to interview these people or whatever procedure or in interview process. That'll happen next Tuesday on the 22nd. In my hope, my expectation is that we'll have plenty of support on council, that the 28th, the second second council meeting in May will be the meeting that we'll really have the first vote calling for support and try to get this thing passed and formed and on about the business of trying to build a grocery store, sports complex, a new industrial park, be in a position to take over the hotel if it comes back into city ownership, and look at the idea of having an industrial park that I think everyone who's looked at it knows is necessary if we really want to bring new industrial opportunity to the community. So, all right. I've either put them all to sleep, Matt, or there might be a question or two on that topic or all the other city issues. All right, we're back. I guess this has been a little bit disruptive, so there is recorded, 7 or 8 minutes of a description of the idea of a port authority in the city of Galion. The purpose of that ranged from constructing a new facility that could be a new grocery store through a new industrial park, and ultimately supporting uptown redevelopment, in particular the hotel. The main project that I'd hope the port would tackle first is the Freeze Athletic Center, and so that's really the synopsis of those several minutes. If you want to see those comments, go back if you would, and we'll repost that part. And now now that we're back up, if there's anybody who is reconnected, we'll try to do a few questions. And if not, we'll bail until 2 weeks from now. So
we have nothing yet. If you want to give people a couple minutes to kind of tune back in.
Yeah, if it is. If there are some people that want to. If it is, I don't know, what the hell does that mean? This looks so easy on YouTube, It's like they get on, they talk, they're rich, they're famous. But I'm absolutely convinced as we start to get get some people maybe turning back in, that this is how we're going to need to communicate here in Galion and other small towns going forward. So I'll save that monologue for another day, but I'm convinced that we need to do more of this than less of this. In terms of communicating in a post-daily newspaper day.
Okay, we had a sort of a follow-up question from Mark. He asked what he missed. So Mark, just to quickly explain, we had some technical difficulties. Tom's beginning portion of the meeting or of the video will be reposted right now. We just want to take some audience questions. That way we can get through the live portion and then combine everything afterwards to repost it.
But to quickly summarize, maybe another question will come in. I'm firmly convinced that the next step that needs to be taken by Galion as a city, as a community, is the formation of a port authority so that we can tackle some of the development challenges, if you will, that we face. And so I went through various specific projects that a port authority, if formed or when formed, will start tackling, including this issue of no grocery store. Although again, I forget, my wife and I were at Drug Mart doing our thing at Drug Mart to the tune of $100 and some the other day. So I mean, the stores that are here are certainly providing a great service. Only the testament of that is we stood in line like you sometimes do, because they just have so many customers. But we need a grocery store in town. We also need a new industrial park. We need to be able to have a structure that helps the continued redevelopment of Galion, and I'm a firm believer in the need to utilize freeze funds to build something that is that not every community has. Not every community in North Central Ohio, in fact no community in North Central Ohio, has the kind of facility that has been envisioned and designed and is really at a point that's really ready to be financed and put into operation. So that's really, Mark, what I was talking about, and that is the only piece of legislation at tomorrow night's council meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Next question tonight comes from Joanna. She asked about the timeline for the new playground.
Yeah, I think it's on order. This is the plan. We've had some nice local industrial help, and these are like good citizens asking other people. Looks like we've got shipping when the project is, or the elements of the project are completed. We've got a volunteer to go to Minnesota to bring back a number of the custom-made toys for the playground. I guess there are two of them, as I understand, that are floating across. They're made in Germany, so I'm not sure if they come into an eastern port and then go to Minnesota and then will come here that way. But that's along the way. My expectation, and I was talking to a bunch of seniors today at Mill Creek about National Long-Term Nurses Week, so it's a good thing. If you know anyone that works in a nursing home, thank them this week. But in any case, I said I get in trouble all the time setting a date, so I will go ahead and crawl out on that limb. We'd like to see the project beginning in the first part of July. Unfortunately, it's going to be fall before it's completed. But something like about the time kids go back to school, we'll have playground open for them. So we're a little frustrated by it, but we're moving ahead the best that we can. The question wasn't asked, but I'll go ahead and kind of over-answer it. We also ordered 2 new toys for out at the splash park. You know, we knew when we opened that up that it was, you know, brand new and cool, and you know, everybody would be excited about it. We hoped, at least, and they have been. And but we also designed it so some of the water spouts there could be upgraded, and new toys, new play features added. So we're going to add another water cannon that looks like Nemo, sort of a fish-looking water cannon. I don't know how it lives out of the water, but we'll just suspend reality. And then the other one is about 11-foot, 12-foot giraffe. So that'll be kind of fun. A lot of the toys out there have water that drops down from above, and this will be another in that group of toys. So those 2 water features, they're likely to be here in and about the same time. Won't require as much installation. So we're hoping by, you know, 4th of July or that in that range, that the upgrades to the splash park will be in place. So.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Jumping back to Port Authorities real quick. Mark asked, where does the money for the Port Authority come from?
Well, the money will come from a number of places. I'm hoping that some of the money that's being raised for the sports complex can be dedicated to port operations. I also envision that the startup of the port would be accomplished by some of the money coming into the city's capital improvements fund. The short answer to the question is the startup money for the port is likely to come as an advance, or I would envision it as a grant from the city. and my guess is over a 1 or 2 year period before it generates enough income to cover its expenses, that would run into the 200,000 to 300,000 range in terms of a subsidy that would be needed to start up operation. The port itself and the board members will be uncompensated, but the expenses for the facility would come from, or excuse me, for the organization would come from when certain staff is hired. In particular, if a sports complex is constructed. So that's those are the main dollars. When it comes to financing a grocery store, a commercial building, when it comes to financing the infrastructure at an industrial park, I would say in the first that financing would be done with the bank based on the kinds of leases and business commitments that are made to occupy the building. And then the port itself has the ability to finance debt if necessary. So to try to simplify a good question, complex answer, some of the money I believe will be startup money coming from the city. Some of the money will come from the financing of some of the early projects. And most of the expenses will be incurred only when there is a facility up and running. So, unlikely that you would hire somebody to do real estate development in the industrial park area until the port had secured some property and was in the process of actually developing the industrial park. So, I hope that answers the question. If there's some more follow-up, we can go back and forth because it's a good question, important question. I see that in 5 years, the facility being self-sustaining, though. The facility as in the Port Authority.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next question tonight comes from Sarah. She asked, when is a light going to go in out by 30, I assume on State Route 598?
Yeah, when I was talking to my friends at Mill Creek, when I was talking about getting burned, it was that topic that we were discussing, that when is the light going to go up. So I'll go back to that. I crawl out on the limb. I think September is, I'd said early when it was confirmed we were going to be able to get the light put up based on it being qualifying or warranted. I thought that we'd get it in by Labor Day. It's probably, I said to the residents, I said, I'll be thankful if it's done by Thanksgiving. So my guess is it's in the fall. And I've mentioned this before, the long lead time is going to be the procurement of the poles, that the light poles that the traffic light will be strung from. And we hope to start getting quotes on that early next week. So, we're not going to hit Labor Day, but I think we're going to hit sometime in the fall, and it certainly will be an improvement.
Okay.
That was the question. Like, when's it going to be done? I'll be thankful if it's Thanksgiving, but we could always we're going to try to do better.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Next question tonight comes from Dawn. She asked, will some type of committee be formed related to the sports complex?
Yeah, that Port Authority will be, I'm not sure exactly what the purpose of the committee would be, but the purpose of the port is to be that entity that determines what the exact financing would be, what the overall final design would look like. And I think the most critical thing in this process is hiring the right person, or maybe, depending on how things get going, the right persons, meaning maybe 2 staff, that can organize the commercial part of it. Be real easy to be able to provide the schedule for the gym times for the Galion 5th graders, potentially the Crestline middle school volleyballers, or whatever the various uses, because there remains a lot of unmet need of Crawford County kids not really being able to get into gymnasiums at a time that works well with their schoolwork. So There's a bunch of work there before you even, a bunch of hours of use there before you even get into the travel teams and the weekend tournaments. So as far as a committee, that would be what the Port Authority board members, their principal function would be.
Okay. And Mark just chimed in with another question related to Port Authorities, just while we're on the subject still.
Right.
Does any other city the size of Galion have a Port Authority?
Yeah, a lot of them do. There's a map around here. I'd like dig around like the stacker of stuff that I am, but Newark's a good example. Been real successful. They took over what was going to be an abandoned a defense contractor base down there. They've done really big things in Newark. It's been a super big success. Steubenville, Jefferson County, has a port authority. It largely was around preserving a steel mill and some railroads down there. Zanesville has a port authority. They use it in large part to attract new industry to the area. I think here, if I go through the list or get out the map, those are some examples of some in smaller communities. I want to say Wellsville. This is a notorious example. It's a river town. Anyways, they have a big hazardous waste incinerator over there, and it's owned by the Port Authority. It's the one that Martin Sheen came in and tied himself to the ground or something or other. But a lot of times you see a Port Authority that is formed for a single purpose. Like someone, a cynic or something might say, "Well, Tom, how'd you get so fired up on port authorities?" It really was my experience working for the state in the rail area. And a lot of the smaller port authorities were formed around the need to preserve a rail that was going to be abandoned. That's the origin and the explanation around the Seneca Sandusky County Port Authority. It serves a bunch of industries in Tiffin that had hundreds of jobs, and so you see it as this creation sometimes as a matter of necessity. Give me another example is Coshocton. I like Ohio geography a lot, so if I sit here very long, I'll think of another of them. But those are 5, 6 port authorities in what I would describe as relatively small towns. And each one of them formed for a different purpose, but often it was for industrial development or redevelopment. And the ability of Port Authority to do projects outside the regular debt limit, which becomes a particular problem here in Galion. We can talk about either later tonight with the question or in the future why we need an entity that can issue debt because our county has got itself at its debt limit. But it might get into too much crap or minutia or something along those lines.
Okay. We're going to switch gears now to street paving.
Yeah.
Travis asked, is there a timeline for the paving project available?
Yeah, I think the project was being let out to bid. Matt, you may know the bid date. There is a bid date. It's coming up.
Bids were due today, actually.
Oh, all right. Mm-hmm. Well, bids were due today. In fact, I know at least we'll have one bidder because I remember a overnight letter came in. So I imagine we'll have, as I'll often use the expression, usual suspects. I imagine we'll have 2 or 3 bidders. So the bids are due today. We're going to open them when?
So we opened today.
All right. Well, what do you know, Matt? Because I didn't.
So we received 2 bids, and now that we've got contractors, that we're deciding on, as soon as the contractor is selected, then we can establish a time frame.
Right. 2 questions, Matt. So you'll become the off-camera interview. Were they below our estimate?
They sure were.
Okay. So my guess is they're 2 local contractors. I bet you I can tell you who they are, and it's hard to tell. It's such a competitive business which one of the area contractors. So that contract will be let in the next few days. one of our goals we didn't quite hit. It is early in the season. That's a good thing, but we hope to be able to get in that really rundown section of Jefferson between the bridge and Church Street, kind of by the Little League and tennis, Little League fields and tennis courts. But we're probably going to stay the heck away from that until baseball is over in a few weeks. But there you go. If you asked the wrong person, but the right person was in the room to give you the answer. So that's what's going on, Travis. There may be a little bit of money as you get through the year to do some small segments of paving, but my guess is those would be unbid. They'd be less than $50,000. It would be a street here, a street there, based on money that shook out. And I do know how bad North Market Street is. It's not on the list. And the other one that I hear a lot about in similar condition is Grand over in the 4th Ward. If you know where Grand is, you know how bumpy it is, particularly from Orange to Clymer. But those are a couple of sections that aren't in the mix that are probably, you oftentimes hear about the projects, the roads that don't get paved, and not about our good choices of the ones that are. So.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next question tonight comes from Gene. He asked, is it possible to add stairs to the west side of Powers Reservoir?
I'd never been asked that. It has an incline, doesn't it? West side. Oh, that'd be the far side. Gosh, I don't know. Bear with me. We'll take a look. We'll check on that. That's all I can say. We did have a discussion about a porta pot, so I think we're going to get one of those out there. I guess it's been an oversight in the past. So, anyways.
Okay. Sorry, just
Gene, honestly, we'll look at that. I'd never considered the possibility, and the only thing I can think of is not doing anything that would weaken the bank. That's the thing that ODNR gets nervous about are the strength of the banks and making sure that there's. So my thought is if you put too heavy of a stairs, if for instance you put footers down in to hold a concrete, that you might run into issues of weakening the bank. So but it's a good question, and we'll get some engineering assessment of that and get back with you. I think what we'd like to do is post that, but in 2 weeks, if we have an answer, we'll get back. If we have something sooner, we'll stick it up on the website.
Okay,
Well, I
thanks.
sound tired tonight. I feel tired. I apologize. It's been a long day, but so I don't mean to seem like burnout by that answer. It's a good question.
Okay, next question tonight comes from Heather. She asks, how about working on other areas of Galion other than slamming everything on 598?
I would say let's start an argument. Let's start a debate. What I would do is address what I would consider sort of a fallacy, the premise of the question. It's like, we don't slam anything anywhere. That's sort of not how it works. The people that have invested in money in Galion have invested in the areas of Galion that they think they can make money, where the traffic is and where they can make money. So I think a lot is overstated, and it's a misunderstanding of how things operate in terms of the role of city government, that we steer clients to a certain place or put people in certain pieces of property. Why does it go in sort of a different way to approach it? Why does it all go to 598? Well, it goes to 598 because the Portland Way, Harding Way intersection is the biggest, the most heavily trafficked intersection in the county. And that there's more traffic on Portland Way North than most of the other state routes combined. So when you look at it, like there's 13,000 vehicles out there from about, let's see, who do we want to plug tonight? Goff Snyder Funeral Home or McDonald's in that area on out to Brant Road. There's just a tremendous amount of traffic out there. So I think to my way of thinking, or the facts of the matter, and to my way of thinking, the explanation as to why there's more investment out there has to do with the amount of traffic and what the people investing in those operations think is the best location to operate profitably. And so I don't know. I don't know. I guess sometimes I wonder if some people want to go back to the time when nothing was being slammed anywhere. You know, like there was no investment in Galion. So now I guess that's good news, because now we've got enough going that people are sort of saying, well, can't you put it here? Can't you put it there? I think it's good that it's going. I think the only thing I would do to sort of pick a second fight in one answer is, what I'm stunned by and continue to be frustrated by is that investment is coming from people outside of Galion. And the town needs, for it to be really vital and firing on all cylinders, one might say, we're really going to need to have some of that wealth, some of that old money, if you will, in Galion, that begins to invest in Galion. But so long as the Bell stores, those people come in from Massillon, they want to buy that property. I think they spent $5 million. It's like, wow. I don't think I slammed them anywhere. What else? Where should the sleep in go? The other interchange where I'd like to see industrial development, we're $3 or $4 million away from necessary roadway and sewer infrastructure. So it's going invested by people from outside the community almost exclusively, and it's going to where they know the traffic is, and they think give them the best opportunity to be successful. So that ought to stir up some. I don't mean to be difficult about it, but it's really cliche, but it's true. When we screw up here, we get far too much blame, and when stuff goes good, sometimes you get credit for it. And about half of that development that's being slammed in the west side of town, all we did was say, hey, thanks for thinking of Galion, shake their hand. What can we do to make it happen? We don't bring them in like a fisherman out at Amon's Reservoir. It's not how it works. And I'm way into it, so I really believe that there's certain things you have to know to be able to get development going. But I'm just glad that we have at least some of the answers, and we've been able to track that investment. I don't know. That's all I got to say on that. Excuse me for droning off on that, but it just makes me wonder. It's like, well, would it be better if it was in Ontario? Or it's like, well, maybe this should be over in Bucyrus. Like, I'm never gonna quite understand why, when we have things going in this town, it's criticized about where it is within a mile area. Now, if you don't walk or if you don't drive, I get that. Believe me, I get that. And finding ways to have people without transportation have a chance to get to where there's commercial stuff. We're actively trying to make that better. In fact, I know it's gotten better under the SCAT, but I'm maybe off on what people consider a tangent. There are so many more. I think I was told last week 150% increase in the number of public transit trips in the county. That's a good thing. That says that if new investments located in a mile away from where people who don't have cars, they can get a ride to that in ways that they couldn't a year, 2 years ago. So, I don't know. It didn't. It's just real important, and we'll move on. I'm assuming there's another question. I'm hoping there is. Get me off the hook, maybe.
Well, ironically, I was going to bring up on the same topic.
Good.
Jackie pointed out, with all of that development out on 598, traffic does tend to be very heavy as opposed to other areas.
Right, and I'm not sure how that relates to the previous question, but traffic, but investment wants, it needs traffic. It's got to have, it is the river, next to which people build. It's where the commerce goes by. And so, yeah, it will, I guess I tend to look at it as one good thing will lead to another. However, out at 61 and 30, like I said in the first part, you have to go back and watch it because I'm not sure it was streaming right, really believe that there's some of the greatest opportunity for economic development in the Galion area out at 60-31, or 31-60, excuse me. And so, I don't know. Got any more questions?
Yeah, we're going to switch gears here. Question came from Jared. How about a canoe livery on the Olentangy River?
Oh, golly. You'd learn all kinds of the meaning of all kinds of words if we did that. And some of them wouldn't be four-letter. One of them would be portage. Because when I've walked it, and we've, in different jobs, been responsible in one way or another for clearing out the Olentangy, you can't go down that sucker very far, even in high water flows, without seeing log jams. So you would be portaging up and out, and in low water times, there's enough rapids that I'm not sure how far you could navigate. Another interesting one, a river I don't know as nearly as much about as the Sandusky. Now that one might be worth, and at one point in time I'd thought about, wouldn't that be neat to canoe from the source to the mouth of the Sandusky, and then I started doing some mapping on that, and there's some hellacious falls up by Fremont, so I decided, yeah, it's probably not for me. So in terms of navigable waters in Crawford County, I'm probably be thumbs up on the Sandusky, but I think if you walked it very far, you would see there are a lot of log jams between here and its way down into Marion County. So sorry. Good idea. We just, if that's some sort of joke about the Port Authority, Jared's got the funniest joke of the night, but anyways, that's why I don't think we're not talking about a canoe livery, but I can take a joke. So, if any of these, when all these things happen, we'll have Jared come out and be in the ribbon cutting, telling me he motivated us with his humor. What else we got?
Question from Samantha just came in. I'm not sure what she meant here. Could use Kobe Park, but it's extremely bogged up. Oh, I guess for the canoe livery. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Could use Kobe Park.
Hey, thanks, Samantha. I made some. I really don't want to comment on that, but you said the trigger word, which was Kobe Park. A couple of weeks ago, when there were a lot of things got all flared up about the park, playground equipment, some stuff came on, and I thought it was a fun and productive hour or so that I spent answering questions. And there were questions and comments about Kobe Park. And I made some, I guess, what is it when you don't know what you're talking about? Was that called ignorant? So I made some ignorant comments about the property itself and was corrected by my friend Eric Weber. He said he and his cousin Jeremiah, who my boys are related to, used to go back into Kobe Park all the time, and sure enough, the one large pond back there is on city property. Now it's a heck of a mosquito thicket, and we'd have to do some things. So the reason I mentioned that to Samantha's question is I gave the impression, in fact I did say, man, I just lock Kobe Park and mow it a couple times a year. That was wrong, it's baloney. And so Eric pointing out, no, there is a big pond back there, causes us to look at Kobe Park potentially as a dog park, and so I just wanted to use that question to say, yeah, I was pretty dismissive and ignorant to say that Kobe Park has no potential. So we're gonna dig in and try to make it work. And there is a body of water that could perhaps be rehabilitated and could be used as some sort of dog park. Anybody who's gone to dog parks that don't have a place for the dogs to swim know that they're losers, and we wouldn't want to start something, that was like inside the old horseshoe pit or something like that. So that's a joke to my friend Jeff Reeser. Go ahead. What else you got? It's pretty bad when I'm telling jokes that even the guy I'm telling them to won't think it's funny. But if we're gonna have a dog park, we're gonna have a nice dog park, and so we're back on that trail. And Kobe Park may have future use, and future as in the next 3 years.
Okay. Question just came in from Steven. He asked any ideas on downtown parking solutions, and he also wanted to point out that there's been a lot of investment made by Galion locals in the downtown area.
Parking, age-old problem, age-old issue. If you get into the literature of it, which I do, not intensely, but I read about uptown and the newest uptown areas. Many of the arguments are that not having parking or tearing down, say, frontage on in our case, Harding Way to put up parking, is a bad idea and a lame excuse, and that people don't. It's overblown that people talk about parking being a reason for them not to shop in downtown Delaware or downtown Galion or whatever the case may be. As far as the main question, I don't. There has been some investment in uptown. There's been investment by merchant tenants and by owners. But it's been a while since there's been a lot of investment. And I think my main point was, and I appreciate that, it is true there has been some investment. The old Midland building, as a good example, was just purchased. Nice big dumpster as they're getting ready to renovate that property. So I'll stand corrected on some of it. The biggest investment in the last 5 years came from the city of Galion, though. So I guess we count too, sort of. So I'm not disassociating myself from the uptown, but there have not been millions of local dollars put in uptown in the last 5 years. Certainly 20 or 25 years ago, when the Gimbel family made a major investment in saving a lot of those properties, that'd be true. But in the last 5 or 6 years, there have been some investments in uptown, but I'm not going to back away that most of the investment has been from people outside the community. So it's a good debate. I'm glad I'm glad to have it, because my whole point in bringing it up is to encourage it by asking, kind of where's it been. So yeah, there have been some investments, and I think by and large they are bearing fruit. But
okay, next question tonight comes from Jackie. She asked, how can we keep people who live uptown from letting their dogs use the landscaping as grounds to go to the bathroom?
Yeah, I'm going to get back in the habit of walking. I was sick a couple years ago, and so I haven't walked quite as much. But I can remember for first 3-4 years I was mayor, I would show up from walking to work, and first thing everybody around here would have to hear about is the dog dookie. I think that falls in the category of it's hard to teach that sort of responsibility to adults. And so I think what we're left with is either pick the organics off your shoe, or that we have to fund, as we try to do, sort of an uptown policing crew. The city's response really is up and down from year to year based on the number of summer youth we're able to hire. So wish us luck as we bring in summer youth. And, if we get 3-4 of them, then we do a lot better job with weeds and doggy control. what we could do to make it better for somebody who just forgets their bag when they're taking their dog for a walk versus somebody who never takes a bag. You could put up some bags. Other towns have done that. But in terms of policing it, in terms of ticketing, I'm not for that. I think policing it in terms of cleaning up after irresponsible people, that's probably what we're stuck with. The other thing I would say, though, that is, it's not all bad, because those dogs they don't live out by the hospital. They don't live on Gledhill Drive or something, and their owner brings them uptown to crap uptown. These are generally what I think are people who have dogs that live in the apartments uptown, which is a good thing for Galion, who, when they go to walk them, they sort of let them relieve themselves in what some might describe as the neighbor's yard. So I guess to summarize on that, I think probably what we intend to do is, now it's warming up, get out there. I'm not going to send people in the $17 to $20 an hour range to go pick up dog dirt, but when we're able to bring on some summer youth and they're funded through the federal program, that seems like it's a pretty good way to address it. But I don't know what you do about enforcement. It's not cost effective, and you're not going to cause somebody who isn't responsible to become responsible.
Okay. Next question tonight comes from Gene. He asked, any news on the old Firelands building?
Yeah, I think it's been rented by, I don't know for sure, but I understand it's been rented or is being renovated in anticipation of a couple nonprofits going in. And, that's, a lot of us remember it before as a commercial building. It's real, unique and pretty building, and it's had 2 or 3 lives as a commercial building. Hopefully this next life will return it to the real asset along Harding Way West. So that's what's going on. I noticed there's been a new roof put on and some repairs, and I understand it's 2 nonprofits. Big secret, not sure which 2 nonprofits there are, but stay tuned. I'm sure we'll hear in the next few weeks. I'm glad to see that it's rented again, though, for sure.
Okay, looks like that's all the questions we have for tonight.
Yeah, well, good. Sorry for the broken stream. It's kind of interesting how this works. I'm still trying to figure it out. You totally lose the stream, and then when it gets back up, people find this valuable enough to be persistent and sticking on. And then we had a handful of questions, so that's gratifying. I'll just wrap up by saying some of the criticism of these kind of podcasts are some people's belief that my approach or my attitude is unprofessional, and I don't mean it that way. But I tell you, I've had my fill of politicians that that are posing and won't tell you what you want. I get accused of talking around the issue. I'm sensitive to that. I try to be clear, but my intent's not to be unprofessional, but it's to try to be comfortable in who I am and convey the kind of person that you've elected as mayor. If I thought wearing a suit and a tie and sitting up straight and not wise guying every once in a while was what y'all expected, I'd play that part. But really, what you get out of this is myself trying to represent you and using this tool in the absence of a daily paper, using this tool to get feedback back and forth. So I really appreciate the questions and when you're glib and straightforward about stuff, sometimes you are offensive to people, but please don't understand that as undedicated or unprofessional. And if you don't like the style points, I apologize. I'll try to deliver for you all on the substance. And if you kind of like joking around, then tune in a couple of weeks, and we'll do this again. Thanks for listening, and thanks for putting up with the technical difficulties. Good night.